In the icy expanse of the North Pole, a drone operator named Carter was carrying out routine aerial surveys. What started as a typical day in the frigid wilderness quickly turned into something extraordinary when his drone's camera captured something about the icy landscape that left him baffled. When he zoomed in to see better, he saw a polar being doing something he had never seen before. During his many drone flights over the North Pole, Cart had seen several polar bears from time to time, far fewer than he would have liked, but unfortunately this was often the case with animals at risk of extinction. As someone who deals with wildlife and nature on a daily basis, this was something she had to get used to. Carter was also aware that changes in climate and natural habitat can cause animals to behave differently than they normally would. This is the case, in particular, of polar bears, who see their ice house melting more and more every year right in front of their eyes. But Carter had never seen this kind of behavior. He continued to film the polar bear and made sure to save all the footage. He also tried to get closer to the animal to try to help him understand what exactly was happening. He was so focused on the animal's behavior that he completely lost sight of the drone's battery life. The battery was running out quickly at these temperatures, but Carter didn't realize it. He only realized what was happening when it was already too late. The drone began to slow down and descend to the ground. At first, Carter thought there was a mistake or something, but he felt like a complete idiot when he took a look at the battery life. She was completely discharged. He no longer had any control over the drone, which slowly lowered itself to the ground. The drone's screen went off, and all Carter had now was footage and a rough idea of the drone's location. And he knew he was in trouble. It was not just any drone, it was a very expensive long-distance drone, which had been equipped to withstand very low temperatures. Its value was around $100,000. If he hadn't recovered it, he would have ended up on the street. By this time, Carter had foolishly already completely forgotten about the polar bear. His mind was focused only on the drone and what he should do now. One thing was certain: he had to retrieve it before his superiors found out he was gone. But to do so, he had to enter the frozen terrain of the North Pole, with all the dangers that this would entail. The base where Carter was at the time was also at the North Pole, but in a place with a little more infrastructure. From here, he should have taken an icebreaker boat and got as close as possible to the drone. The boat trip takes about 2 hours. From there, he would have to walk for about an hour through the ice and snow to reach the drone. At this point, he remembered the polar bear. How dangerous would it have been to go out there with such a creature walking around as he pleased? Carter retrieved the footage he had just recorded and tried to study the animal's behavior again. It was anything but normal. But he didn't know if this made the animal more or less dangerous. In any case, it seemed suicidal to him to go on a mission alone. He needed help. Fortunately, there were a couple of other people working at base camp at the time, and Carter had a decent relationship with them. Not one that he wanted to go with him to help him retrieve a drone, but good enough to convince his uncle. And the video of the polar bear should be enough to convince them. When Carter showed the footage to his two fellow researchers, Kyle and Norman, they were absolutely stunned. They had never seen anything like it and wanted to know more. But Carter told them that the only way to do that was to go to the animal. The two researchers were understandably hesitant, but eventually agreed to go. They made sure that bad weather would not be an issue and quickly boarded one of the two small icebreaker boats to set off on their expedition. During the journey, the researchers couldn't stop speculating about what exactly the polar bear might be doing. They really had the feeling that they were in front of something special. A discovery that could have taught them much more about this special animal. Carter had no problem joining them in these speculations, but his mind was obviously focused, above all, on recovering the drone. He didn't care if Kyle and Norman found out what he was doing when he got there, because he could explain that he planned for it to happen. who wanted to get the polar bear footage at all costs. But this argument would only be accepted if the mission was a success. The journey through the ice was easier than expected. Just as they had predicted, the melting of the ice had progressed steadily and perhaps even gone a little faster than expected. A bad sign in general, but for the time Carter thought it was a bit useful. They managed to hook the boat to one of the larger ice caps and then headed for the mainland. From here, they had to start being careful. On the ice, they were out of their element, and they knew that there was potentially a polar bear nearby. They slowly headed in the direction Carter had indicated, becoming more nervous every minute. Researchers began to wonder if they had made a big mistake. The cold wind howled as Carter, Kyle, and Norman trudged across the snow-covered ground. GPS coordinates led them to a vast, empty space where the drone should have been. Their eyes scanned the horizon, but the drone was out of sight. The unrelenting Arctic landscape stretched out to infinity, offering no clue, only the bitter cold seeping through their thick parkas. Carter lifted his binoculars, looking for the polar bear that had caught their attention earlier. But the bear, like the drone, had disappeared into the white expanse. "He was here, wasn't he?" Kyle asked, his voice betraying a hint of anxiety. Norman nodded silently, the bear's absence adding an eerie layer to their already daunting task. In the dim light of the Arctic afternoon, the trio discussed their next move. "We can't wander aimlessly," Norman argued. Carter, however, insisted. "We need to find that drone," he said in a determined voice. Kyle looked between them, feeling the weight of their situation. Without the drone or the bear, they were chasing shadows on the ice. They continued to advance, covering miles and miles of icy wilderness. The drone remained elusive, as if swallowed up by the vastness of the North Pole. Their footsteps grew heavier, every footprint in the snow testifying to their growing frustration. The sun began to sink, casting long shadows on their futile search, compounding the sense of worry that gripped them. As evening approached, the barren and icy landscape seemed to mock their efforts. They were together, three figures swallowed up by the immense and desolate beauty of the Arctic. Doubt crept into their minds. Had they underestimated the dangers of this place? The cold penetrated their bones, and with it, the awareness that they were far from finding what they were looking for. At dawn the next day, their spirits lifted slightly as Kyle spotted a series of distinct footprints in the snow. "Polar bear tracks," he announced. The tracks were cool, in stark contrast to the untouched snow. Carter's eyes lit up. "They could lead us to the drone," he said with renewed optimism. They unanimously decided to follow the trail in the hope of unraveling the mystery. They walked along the bear's path, Carter in the lead. His eyes were fixed on the footprints, deep and deliberate in the snow. The bear's behavior seems unusual, he thought, reflecting on his possible encounter with the drone. The tracks meandered, weaving a story of the invisible creature's journey through the Arctic wilderness, a silent narrative waiting to be unraveled. The terrain became more and more challenging as they followed the tracks. The path led over rugged icy ridges and descended into narrow valleys. Sometimes, the bear's tracks were accompanied by strange drag marks, suggesting that it may have encountered the drone. Could the bear have caught him? Norman wondered aloud, his voice ringing lightly against the walls of ice around them. Determined, the trio tackled the treacherous landscape with maximum concentration. The path wound through icy outcrops and snowdrifts, each step being a test of their determination. As they progressed, the complexity of the trail increased, and the signs of dragging became more apparent. The harsh Arctic elements put them to the test, but the mystery of the bear's tracks pushed them forward, into the unknown. As day fell, the tracks led them through a narrow passage between massive ice formations. Here, the tracks were clearer, the footprints and drag marks distinctly engraved in the snow. "We are close," Carter whispered, with a mixture of excitement and apprehension in his voice. The mystery that began with the disappearance of a drone and a lone polar bear seemed to be on the verge of being revealed. The path twisted and turned, leading them deeper and deeper into the heart of the Arctic. The bear's intertwined tracks and mysterious drag marks painted a perplexing picture. "It's as if the bear and the drone are connected," Kyle remarked, his voice full of curiosity. Each footprint seemed to whisper a piece of the puzzle, but the full story remained out of reach. Huddled around a map, in the dim light of a lantern, the team speculated about the fate of the drone. "Could the bear have been intrigued by the drone?" Carter suggested. Norman replied, "Or maybe it was accidental. The drone ended up in its way." The theories were many, but the answers were as elusive as the bear they were chasing. The landscape became more and more formidable, with steep slopes and hidden crevasses. Every step was cautious. The risk of making mistakes was always present. The tracks led them across a narrow ice bridge, a stark reminder of the danger they were facing. "We must be vigilant," Carter reminded the others, scanning the horizon for any sign of instability in the ice. Later, they discovered a site that suggested a fight. The scratches on the ice and the loose snow told of a chaotic event. Did the bear meet anything else here? Kyle reflected, examining the disturbed area. The possibility that the bear had collided with another animal, or that it had interacted with the drone, added an extra layer of complexity to their investigation. As they approached the end of the trail, the atmosphere was full of anticipation. Each of them felt the weight of the unknown weighing on them. The tracks led to a small clearing, with the snow around undisturbed. "Here we are," whispered Norman, whose voice was barely audible above the howling of the wind. The answer to the mystery lay before us, wrapped in the icy embrace of the Arctic. In the clearing, they found the drone, lying alone in the white snow. It was as if the drone had been gently placed there, far from where they expected. The sight of that familiar technology, so out of place in the wild Arctic expanse, was both amazing and strangely comforting. They approached cautiously, expecting the bear to reappear at any moment. Carter knelt beside the drone, his hands shaking slightly as he examined it. Relief came when he found it mostly intact, with only minor scratches. "It's still in one piece," he announced, a rare smile that shattered his usual stoicism. This was a small victory in the face of their many challenges, a glimmer of hope in the relentless Arctic. The eerie silence of the Arctic enveloped them when they realized that the polar bear was nowhere to be seen. His absence was almost more disconcerting than his presence. They scanned the horizon, feeling exposed and vulnerable in the vast open landscape. "Where did he go?" Kyle murmured, the unanswered question hanging heavily in the cold air. They worked quickly to collect the drone and any evidence that could explain the events. Carter carefully packed the drone, while Kyle and Norman scoured the area for traces or signs of the bear's activities. The snow around them contained few clues, and the mystery thickened with each passing moment. "We need to understand what happened here," Carter said, his voice tinged with frustration. As Arctic twilight fell, the team prepared to leave, their minds filled with unanswered questions. The bear's location, the reason for the drone's undisturbed state, and the strangeness of the whole situation left them more perplexed than when they left. The fading light seemed to carry with it their hopes of understanding, leaving them in a world of shadows and doubts. Once back on the coast, Their hearts sank. The boat, their lifeline to return to base camp, was gone. "It can't be!" Norman exclaimed, his face incredulous. They scanned the area, hoping it was just out of sight. But the reality was inescapable. Stranded on Arctic ice, miles away from safety, the gravity of their situation hit them hard. Near the spot where the boat had been anchored, they found fresh polar bear tracks. The footprints moved away from the shore, weaving a perplexed narrative. Could the bear have something to do with all this? Kyle thought aloud. The possibility seemed far-fetched. But in the Arctic, Carter knew, the unexpected was often the norm. But the how and why remained disconcerting questions. With the situation escalating, Carter retrieved the satellite phone and contacted their base. His voice cracked as he explained their situation. "Rescue is at least a few hours away," the voice on the other end informed them. When he closed the call, he realized the stark reality of their isolation. They were alone, apart from the inexorable Arctic and the mysterious bear. As the cold intensified, survival became their immediate goal. They built a makeshift shelter from snow and ice, using techniques Carter had learned over the years. They huddled to warm up and shared rations, each lost in thought. The howling wind was a constant reminder of the dangerous situation they were in, far from civilization. Night fell like a curtain, plunging them into darkness. The Arctic night was long and unforgiving, filled with the sounds of crackling ice and distant winds. Inside their shelter, the men spoke little, each struggling with their own fears and the vulnerability of their situation. Outside, the northern lights danced in the sky, a beautiful and eerie reminder of their isolation. In their frozen shelter, the team watched the hours pass, each minute longer than the last. They huddled together, trying to resist the cold biting into their bones. The wait for help was distressing, a test of endurance against the relentless Arctic cold. Carter often checked his watch. Every look was a mixture of hope and impatience. Time seemed to slow down as the Arctic twilight lingered. The initial optimism faded, replaced by a sense of doubt. "And if they don't find us?" Norman voiced the fear that hovered unexpressed in the air. Kyle tried to be positive, but the uncertainty was palpable and corroded their resolve. The rigid environment was inflexible, a constant opponent in their wait for salvation. The extreme cold brought unforeseen challenges. Their makeshift shelter offered little comfort against the biting frost. Carter's fingers went numb as he tried to start a small fire, while Kyle's teeth chattered uncontrollably. Norman, trying to lift his spirits, told stories of survival in the Arctic. But his voice was blank, unable to mask the underlying tension that gripped them all. As the time of rescue approached, their spirits lifted slightly. They scanned the infinite white, straining their eyes for any sign of help. "It should come at any moment," Carter reassured them, though his voice lacked conviction. The vastness of the Arctic seemed to mock their hopes, yet they clung to the possibility of being rescued, a faint glimmer in the enveloping darkness. Moments before they were waiting for help, a distant dot appeared on the horizon. "That is," Kyle began, coloring his tone with disbelief. As the shape became clearer, it became apparent that it was a boat. But, to their amazement, it bore a striking resemblance to their missing boat. Confusion mixed with relief, and the two squinted at the dazzling snow, trying to make sense of this unexpected twist. The boat approached, unmistakably identical to theirs. With confusion imprinted on their faces, the men exchanged a puzzled look. "How is this possible?" Norman whispered. They watched in silence as the ship approached the frozen shore. The situation was surreal, like a scene from a dream. challenging their understanding of the events that had unfolded up to that point in the desolate Arctic. When the boat anchored, they instinctively retreated into the shadows of their shelter, their eyes fixed on the landing site. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the white landscape. He moved with a grace that did not seem typical of a human being, but rather reminiscent of the bear they were chasing. The sight was both stunning and terrifying, and it fueled a myriad of questions in their minds. Crouched together, they looked at the figure with bated breath. Could it be someone else stuck like us? Kyle suggested. Or something completely different? Carter added, his voice tinged with uncertainty. The movements of the figure were deliberate, but enigmatic. As they watched, theories abounded, but none seemed to fully explain the surreal scenario unfolding before their eyes in the Arctic wilderness. After a few moments of tense reflection, Carter spoke. "We need answers. We cannot hide here." The others nodded, driven by a mixture of fear and curiosity. They agreed to approach cautiously, aware of the potential danger but driven by the need to understand. Leaving their shelter, they headed towards the figure, each step weighed down by apprehension and the unknown. Their hearts beat fast as they approached the figure. Every sense was sharpened, attentive to any sign of threat or recognition. The figure seemed not to notice their approach, turning his back to them. They stopped a short distance away, preparing to reveal themselves. They knew that this moment held the key to the mysteries that had shrouded their harrowing experience in the Arctic. The team stood as they approached the figure. "Hello!" Carter called, his voice ringing out in the icy expanse. The figure turned slowly, looking like an imposing but strangely non-threatening bear. They stood ready, unsure of what to expect. The moment was charged with tension, a confrontation with the unknown in the heart of the Arctic wilderness. As they got closer, the surreal truth became apparent. The bear was not an animal, but a person dressed in an incredibly realistic bear costume. The shock of the team was palpable. "I'm just a photographer," the figure said, removing his bear head to reveal a human face. The revelation was surprising, the reality of the situation upsetting their understanding of the last few days. The photographer, noticing their bewildered expressions, explained his unique approach. "I use this costume to get close to wildlife without disturbing it," he said. His passion for capturing the natural world in its purest form was evident. The team listened in fascination to the accounts of his experiences, each of which shed light on a world they thought they knew. The photographer's methods were unconventional, but his motivations resonated with the team. "It's about seeing the Arctic through a different lens," explained. His dedication to his art and the environment was inspiring. The team, once wary, now looked at him with a new respect, understanding the importance of his work in documenting the fragile beauty of the Arctic. As the conversation continued, the photographer offered to help them. "I can help you get back to your base," he proposed. His unexpected offer transformed him from a mysterious figure into an indispensable ally. Grateful and relieved, the team agreed, as their ordeal took another unexpected turn. Together, they prepared to turn back, united by the experiences shared in the relentless embrace of the Arctic. Around the campfire, the team and photographer discussed his unique approach in depth. "It's a matter of minimal impact," explained the photographer. His innovative technique of camouflaging himself in the environment to capture wildlife in an unobtrusive way fascinated them. The group nodded, appreciating the creativity and effort required to make authentic photographs of wildlife in the Arctic. Carter, looking at the fire, reflected on the revelations of the day. "It's remarkable how different perspectives can lead to new aspects of nature," commented. The photographer's unconventional methods opened his eyes to new possibilities for wildlife observation and research. He realized that taking different approaches can lead to a deeper understanding of the natural world around them. As the night deepened, the photographer chronicled his expeditions to the Arctic, close encounters with wildlife, serene moments under the northern lights, and the challenges he faced in this challenging environment. His stories, full of passion and danger, captivated the team. They listened, mesmerized by his experiences, which seemed to bridge the gap between man and nature. The conversation flowed smoothly, revealing their shared dedication to understanding and preserving the Arctic's fragile ecosystem. Despite their different backgrounds, they have found common ground in their passion for nature. This sense of unity, born of mutual respect for nature and the work of others, fostered a deep bond between the group, strengthening their determination to protect this unspoiled nature. Meeting the photographer was enlightening and taught the team valuable lessons about adaptability and resourcefulness. They realized that the Arctic, with its unpredictability and harsh conditions, required ingenuity and a willingness to embrace the unexpected. These lessons, learned in nature, would forever influence their approach to work and life in the Arctic. With the drone safely recovered and the mystery unraveled, the team prepared for the return trip to base camp. They loaded their gear onto the boat, every movement reflecting a mixture of relief and satisfaction. The photographer's offer to guide them back was a welcome relief, turning what could have been a treacherous return into a safer journey. As the boat cut through the icy waters, Carter reflected on the unpredictability of Arctic expeditions. Every trip here teaches us something new, he thought, looking at the endless expanse of ice and snow. The unexpected turn of events had been a stark reminder of the changing nature of the Arctic, a place where the line between reality and the unimaginable was often blurred. The shared experience of the last few days had brought the team closer. The challenges faced, the discoveries made, and the unexpected ally found in the photographer have created a bond as strong as the ice that surrounds them. This newfound camaraderie was a testament to their resilience and the unifying power of shared challenges and triumphs. With the Arctic landscape passing by, the team shared stories and lessons learned from their adventure. The atmosphere was light, full of laughter and reflection. They talked about future plans and projects, inspired by their recent experiences. The return journey was not only a return to familiar territory, but also a journey forward, enriched with new perspectives and ideas. Back at base, Carter looked at the icy horizon, contemplating their extraordinary adventure. He felt a sense of accomplishment, coupled with a desire to take on the next challenge in the Arctic. With a story that seemed almost unbelievable, and the knowledge gained from an unexpected encounter, he was ready to face whatever the Arctic had in store for him.